Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
This one happened to my father. Not exactly paranormal, 100% scary. Be dad in the 1980s. Get in a car accident. Multiple broken bones, messed up spine. He's got scoliosis now. Skull fracture, ruptured lung. Another organ was damaged. I can't remember what. Has to go under the knife. Doctors trying to save him. Looks like he isn't going to make it. Apparently he was paralyzed, but he could still hear them, but not see. Doctors start talking about organ transplant for the boss. Doctors begin to cut him open while he is conscious but paralyzed. One doctor begins to argue that this man could easily be saved. What they are doing is wrong. Argument ensues, second time this month. Boss needs another. You do it then. Gets sewn back up. Lives. He says he was slipping in and out of consciousness through the whole thing. Vehemently states they were trying to take his organs on behalf of the boss while he was conscious. Needless to say, he is paranoid about surgery.
I used to be an organ donor because I took the bait. They only harvest from brain-dead patients. Doctors will keep your organs on artificial support. Machines keep oxygen going to the organs. The medical team and OPO official will check the condition of each organ. A transplant surgical team will replace the medical team that treated the donor before they died. The medical team trying to save your life and the transplant team are never the same. The surgical team will remove the donor's organs and tissues. They remove the organs, then they remove approved tissues such as bone, cornea, and skin. They close all cuts. Organ donation doesn't prevent open casket funerals. Organs only stay healthy for a short period of time after removal. Minutes count. The OPO official plans for the moving of the organs. The organs go to the hospitals where the patients who need them are. Organs may go by ambulance, helicopter, or commercial airplane. That paragraph is straight from organdonor.gov. Notice how they use the euphemism, keep the organs on artificial support. That is you. Keep you on life support until they harvest.
Personally, I have no problem with organ transplantation. I mean, define spirit, define soul. Because if we work from the functionalist perspective, your brain isn't suddenly giving up its electrical potential to, say, a functioning kidney that belonged in a serial killer. In fact, that very same serial killer kidney is not what drove the serial killer to kill, nor did it supply the drive or impulses to contort the killer's muscles and drive their actions, such that they killed. It's a kidney, and it may still be in working order. But I'm sure none of that means anything to the OP, as I would eat the flesh of another animal. I would use someone's kidney to keep me alive, as they would be using it no more. And to think, 38 million years and ticking, and while we draw ever closer to making sure no one's kidneys work, some of us still get hung up over the fact that it isn't our kidney that works. That the predilections, predispositions, and actions of those who are beyond our scope somehow invalidate the scope that we do have access to. Strange. Absurd. It is exactly these kinds of unfortunate hang-ups that waste our collective times, and it can drive one to rue the notion that we don't seem to be anything but the savages a man once claimed we could never be, in virtue of having all of recorded history at our fingertips, unrestricted, simply tucked away under label. Even then, in spite of the appropriate means to share that information from generation to generation, like cancer or hereditary diseases, then it seems our afforded common sense can skip a few generations until it becomes prevalent. That's irony enough to slap me on the knee, which I would happily accept from a cadaver.
Be 7-year-old Anon. Remember having to travel to the city for some kind of dental appointment. Remember waiting with mom and dad. Remember them being awfully kind of quiet. Nurse arrives and takes me to a big room. Don't remember what the nurse tells me before the dentist comes in. He says he has to put me asleep with gas. Being the little child that I am, I find it odd but don't question it because I think I could beat the gas and stay up. They put a mask over my face, then they leave the room. I remember thinking this won't work as I look around the room. But it does, and maybe 2 minutes after they left I'm out. I wake up with a jolt and find myself in darkness with little light. I remember finding myself tied upside down. I look ahead at the back of many heads, sitting face towards something. I look past the heads to the giant screen they're watching. There's a person being cut up on and operated on. All I could do was scream incoherently for my mom and dad. I remember one of the heads turning at some point and they had a doctor's mask like in PIC related and they were wearing glasses. It's a man. He brings a finger up to his mouth and says something, but I don't remember it. He turns back around and I am stuck in this theater. At some point I tire myself out screaming and go unconscious. When I wake up again, I am back in the house with my parents and it is night. I don't know why, but I pull up my shirt to look at something that isn't there. I don't know if what happened was a nightmare or not, and it confuses and terrifies me to the point of not being able to sleep. In the morning I asked Dad and Mom when we got back from the city and they said yesterday morning. I don't know how to ask them the next question. I don't know the right questions to ask. So I just ask, did anything happen? They say, like what? Anything weird? I ask.
Did you have a nightmare, Anon?
I only look at Mom.
Well,
No, I finally say.
then why did you ask?
I don't know. Never tell anyone what happened all these years because I wasn't sure if it did happen or not. But the sheer feeling of dread and horror still remain, and I still clearly remember flying to that city with parents and waiting with them before the nurse got me.
About a year and a half ago, I woke up in a crisis unit in Key West. I met a girl who thought she was a demon and thought I was an angel. Or something. She was obsessed with duality and thought I was her opposite. I don't remember much because of all the different meds they had me on. After a month of that, they sent me to the state hospital. I refused to participate for the first 2 weeks. Just walked around the unit listening to the shitty pop they always played. I still wasn't in my head at that time. My delusions were embarrassing. But I demanded they get me off all the meds, and they did. I got all the way back to normal a week after the drugs stopped. The only paranormal thing that happened besides the staff showing us a bunch of DVDs on occult symbolism and assassinations was one night towards the end. Me and a few other patients were talking with the staff in the atrium. Abruptly she looks in the direction of B wings, my wings, day room. She said, "Why is there someone cleaning out there at this time of night?" There was an enclosed outside space we got to hang out in every now and then. We walked over to see what she was talking about. Didn't find a janitor, but we did find one of the low-functioning guys rocking back and forth saying, "Lysol," over and over. He wasn't within earshot or her line of sight. The same staff told us what she was going to school for. Embalming the dead. In her words, for the resurrection. She said they needed to have the right face paint or it wouldn't work. At the time she said this, I was still on the meds. I freaked out a little. Images of necromancy. Told her it was wrong. We shouldn't try to bring the dead back. You won't get what you want.
In a perfect world with no foul play, by medical laws and ethics, no, it's not real shit. Organ donor status should play no effect in medical treatment until the point of brain death. But we all know that no one is crooked or doesn't have your best interests in mind right. It would probably depend on the location or hospital you end up in. Many small rural hospitals wouldn't have capabilities or equipment to harvest organs if the patient isn't transferred to a larger facility. I personally would be more scared of a hospital in a large city. Also, organ donation is a relatively small fraction of the donation system. Tissue donation like cornea, skin, bone is more commonly performed, just because a donor still needs to have perfusion to the organs, a pulse to donate them.
Hello Anons, I want to share a little story with paranormal context here. Be aware, my English is not that good, so be kind, and also this won't be some spooky scary skeleton story, so here we go. Little backstory. I was working in a hospital in the Czech Republic, Prague, for like 6 years. It's a very old hospital that was built somewhere around 1850. I'm a male nurse, and since I was the youngest in our department, 18, I have had a lot of night shifts. In our department, people were dying frequently, around 3 or 4 a week. I was never into ghost stuff and shit, and since my mother is a really good card reader, I was even more skeptical and non-believer. But for the last 6 years there was a room with number 27, mostly a male room with 4 patients all the time. Shortly after I started to work here, many male patients were talking about the boy that sits on the window and looking at the patients. At first I was not very concerned about it because lots of patients were insane and saw literally everything and everywhere. But since the first episode of Mysterious Boy and Patients Changing, I was starting to be aware that more and more patients are talking about him. Mostly he was sitting in a window or in the corner of the room, and one patient told me he was sitting on a tree in front of the window to room 27. With more and more cases I started to get spooks, especially when one patient called me around 3 a.m., pale as a ghost and staring at the window. He pleased me to go tell him to go away. The patient was mentally healthy and no meds he was giving couldn't mess his mind into hallucinations. I politely told him that it was just a dream and he should go to sleep before he wakes up another patient. He was silenced and I was looking at his eyes that were moving from the window to us. He gasped and told me that he is standing next to me. I was almost shitting bricks. I didn't feel anything but the amount of coincidences about this boy was getting into my mind. I started walking around the room, waving my hands like a madman. Another story is same as previous, not scary at all, but mostly interesting. In our department there are rooms 26 to 30. This incident happens in room 28 during summer. There was one male patient dying. He was mean to his family and even to us. He was verbally insulting and twice hit nurses to face. He was very fat and couldn't move, so he was laying on his back full of gangrenous open wounds. He constantly yelled for a doc. He knew that the doctor has a private room, office right in front of this room and next floor. In this hospital there is a ceiling around 15 meters or more from ground, so the hospital makes a mid-floor on every floor for some lockers or offices. In front of room 28 were stairs that led to doc and the patient was staring at those stairs calling doc for almost a week. He just wanted help. But there was really not much to do, he was simply dying. At the end he was getting 1 milligram of morphine every 4 hours, so every opiate junkie will be wasted for life. Now finally to point. He died one day on my shift. I helped him to eat some lunch, but since he was on huge doses of morphine he barely opened a mouth. I wasn't forcing him to eat because I didn't want him to inhale food and die on my shift. I left the room and came back around 30 minutes after I finished my lunch while watching some stupid TV show with co-nurse. I found him dead with open mouth full of liquid. He must have vomited from the food and the sedative effect and inability to move left him with liquid in his mouth, and he eventually drowned in his vomit. Hacking a dead body was never hard for me since I rather pack a dead body than fill papers about death, and trust me, there are a lot of papers. I tried to get rid of the liquid in his mouth so we can pack him in white sheets. Unfortunately his lungs was also filled, so we have to turn him on his stomach and let the liquid leave his body by itself. But this is gross, so straight to a point. Few days later strange things started to happening, not only to me, but for most of the nurses. They started to hear the squeaking of stairs to the doctor's office. The stairs have some kind of rubber laminate so no one can slip, and they make very specific sound, and if you are working here, you just know what sounds different equipment or things does. So nurses started to hear someone walking the stairs up and down at night. You surely now knows what my point is, but in those days we just think that it's some other issues or maybe a wind blow since the building is very old. One night when we hear it, I went from our nursery room to check the stairs. No sound, of course. I came back pissed that I'm spoiling myself, but the co-nurse was standing staring at me. Hey Anon, do you remember how he always wanted to go to the doctor's office and was staring at the stairs? I shit bricks again. As I said, nothing creepy and scary, rather strange. Since his death we have been hearing stairs squeaking almost every night. We are used to it and don't even pay attention to it.
For a living, my dad is a pipe fitter. He's gone all around Canada working on buildings, sometimes renovating older ones. There was one particular place that he always liked to tell me about. The hospital. It was an old hospital in the west of Canada, and he was helping to renovate it. There was a certain ward where no one liked to go. The security guards would travel in pairs, and a lot of guys my dad worked with would go home from being frightened in this place. It was on one of the higher floors. My dad, being a gruff old bastard, refused to be spooked and would continue his work through the night. He heard a lot of things in the hospital. There was the usual flickering of lights, and he said he could hear bare feet running up and down the wide, empty halls. Sometimes they would shuffle slowly, but he remembered hearing the running the most. One night he heard the running and several doors slammed shut simultaneously. He kept working. One night my dad and his friend even heard a woman quietly singing to herself for a few minutes in one of the rooms they were just in and had left to get some tool or other from the hall. They stood there and listened to her, and eventually she stopped. It was quiet, mumbling, singing like she didn't really know the words. My favorite part of this story, though, is the nun. There was an old nun in the older garb that they would wear in hospitals, and my dad would see her going through the hospital checking the rooms. He never really saw her up close, but he would see her walking by rooms he was in, and she would peek in and keep walking. The first time he yelled and poked his head out, but she was gone. He only saw her a handful of times.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.